So, welcome everyone to Nature Matters, the importance of outdoor play and child development. My name is Sarah Coles, and I am the Executive Director of the Texas Children in Nature Network. We are excited to have you with us today. We are recording our session today. Thank you for joining us. To save on bandwidth for all of our attendees and for a clean recording, we ask everyone to turn their cameras off and mute themselves during the presentation. I will be monitoring the chat so you can share your questions there, and I will share them with our presenter. Please remember to keep your comments in the chat kind. D'Amica Bisco is running tech for us today. Thank you so much, D'Amica. As I said, we're recording the session and I'll share it in a follow-up email. If you're uncomfortable with your name showing, you can change your name to anonymous and then private message D'Amica with your name for our attendance. Also, if your Zoom name doesn't match the name you registered with, please change your name or let D'Amica know. If you're in need of a certificate and we do not have your name, we will not be able to provide a certificate. And just a reminder, if you're needing a certificate, you will need to follow the directions in the email that was with the Zoom link. I'm going to go ahead and do our land acknowledgement. Texas Children in Nature Network is headquartered in Austin, and as such, I'm on the ancestral and unceded land of the Tonkawa, Comanche, and Sauna people. Our ongoing colonial presence on Indigenous lands compels us to take action now to counteract the effects of colonization. The work we do through the Texas Children in Nature Network is one small step towards that effort. And I'm going to put some links in the chat in just a moment about land acknowledgements and about our people groups. And I'd like to go ahead and welcome our speaker today. Amy Musick is with Smart Family Literacy. Thank you so much for joining us, and take it away.
Hi, I'm Amy. I'm the co-executive director of Smart Family Literacy. And we're going to talk about nature play and the role that playing outdoors has in child development. I love to have discussion, talk, chat. So feel free to drop comments, questions into that chat box. There's only a few of us on here. You are not going to bother me at all if you unmute and say, whoa, 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 wait a minute, let me ask a question. That's totally okay with me. It makes me feel a little less like I'm talking to myself too. So it makes me feel a little better. A little bit about me. I didn't start in early childhood, even though that's where I have really found my passion. I was a middle school and high school teacher for 12 years, and I got my master's in school administration there. And then when I jumped into early care and education, I got another master's in early care and education with a leadership credential, so I could be a child care director nationally in all 50 states. I'm pretty much just addicted to school and learning, so I just keep on going. Um, but my initial degree was in biology. So um, I love being outdoors. I love the nature connection. I will say we are going to talk about some times that I don't love being outdoors, and that's okay too. You don't have to be a professional camper or Boy Scout, Girl Scout to take kids outside. But our comfort level with being outside and what we have here in Texas as far as wildlife and nature can make a difference, right? So we're going to take a look at that too. The, sorry, I have multiple screens and apparently I'm clicking the wrong buttons. Smart Family Literacy, just a quick blurb about what we do that might help you make sense of why I know and study the things that I do. We take a broader approach to literacy in that this is how you access information in your world. So yes, it is reading and writing, but it's so much more than that. And SMART is an acronym for science, math, art, reading, and technology. So we look at how do we access the information in our world and make sense of it using all of those things together. So we give away over 30,000 children's books annually through our education outreach. I trained about 1,400 early childhood educators last year, and we reached over 9,000 children, which is pretty amazing considered we're a tiny little organization in Galveston, Texas, with only 4 full-time employees. So we do ongoing professional development and consultation and mentoring in childcare centers. But the biggest thing that we do with the kids that we interact with in elementary schools, childcare centers, the community at large, is we do a lot of gardening. So you'll see as we talk about being outside today, that I will frequently connect it to growing fruits and vegetables. And we do that for the outdoor connection, the healthy eating habits, and really a more active lifestyle, anti-obesity, low sugar, all of that is written into what we do. Um, I keep wanting to click the button and it's not going. We're also going to talk about being outdoors. Through a couple of different lenses, right? So, a lot of times when I say outdoor play, a lot of the teachers that I'm working with think recess. And yes, that's outdoor play, but we can be outdoor more than just recess. We can do anything that we do inside, outside, depending on our green space and our access, right? Which is another thing we're going to talk about because access is a really big deal right now. But when I talk about being outside, I want to think bigger than recess. It can be structured play, it can be unstructured play, it can be student-led, it can be adult-led. We're going to sort of lump it all together as just enjoying time outside today. If you have a question about a specific scenario, please feel free to jump in and let me know. I do have to put this in here because I've had some really strange questions when I do this. But what about this child that has this condition? Nothing that I say today. I'm going to speak in broad generalities. Nothing that I say today overrides the medical advice that a child has been given or a family has been given for that child. If you have a doctor's note saying that this child can or cannot do something, that's what you need to follow, right? So a quick icebreaker just to see you guys get to know what's your outdoor experience like. Um, of course, this PowerPoint is from when I've done this in person, so don't share with your neighbor. I probably won't hear you. So unmute and share with us or type it into the chat. The question is, which of these six pictures reminds you most of your childhood? And if there isn't a picture up here that does remind you of your childhood, what would that picture be?
I'll share probably the middle on the left running through the big grass field because I was somewhat feral as a child and allowed to just roam the park at my leisure.
I love that. I use that word for my children and for myself growing up as well. And I'm really lucky to have had that experience to be feral because it's on the decline. Anybody else?
We have in the chat from Damika climbing trees and Robin saying bottom right for her, so the skateboarding.
Skateboarding, absolutely. I have been fortunate enough to grow up near water and live my entire life near water. I'm still right on the coast of Texas, tucked in here next to Galveston. So that beach one is a really big deal for me. I tie a lot of my childhood to being outside on the beach. But I was also that one on the top left where I was really happy inside, where it was cool and there weren't any bugs, and that's okay too. That's still a big part um, of our lives. We have to have balance, right? Do we feel like our children could identify with these pictures in the same way that we do? Our children being the ones that we serve in our centers or that we're connected to. And I don't, somebody may be answering in the chat. I'm not sure. All of a sudden, my chat went away. I can't see it.
Uh,
Um,
we have a few more folks saying what their childhood was like, and I'll
oh,
read
awesome.
while folks are thinking. Um, we have TM T. McKee said, I ran through the woods nearby and also spent a lot of time with books. Jennifer, riding bikes around the neighborhood, laying in the backyard looking up at the clouds. Beth, farms, parks, and her yard. Robin says, we had lots of outside time every day after school and especially during the summer at day camp.
Yeah, absolutely. So it sounds like a lot of you have connection to the outdoors, which is great because that means that you are far more likely to help make that connection for the children in your lives. Adults that don't have connections outside are far less likely to encourage their kids to be outside, right? And that's as a parent or a teacher. And what about the kids growing up today? Do you think they would um that they would identify with these pictures the same way that we do?
We have one again from T. McKee. Children today are organized in after school programs, going to practices of one kind or another, or on screens. And Jennifer saying, definitely not as much for our kids today. Playground picture, maybe. Kids spending more time indoors for sure.
Yeah, yeah, it's happening a lot. And that's what we're going to talk about today is how is that changing how we interact with kids, and what our expectations are really of children, and why is that happening? Because there are several reasons why that's happening. So yeah, if they're outside, a lot of times it's way more structured. Like Beth said in the beginning, she described herself as absolutely feral, and I can 100% identify with that. I grew up in southern Maine in the woods, and we just had to be in before dark, right? And even then, sometimes we pushed it and went back out with flashlights or whatever. Um, Screen time is definitely a big thing for both adults and children, right? It's not just the young ones that are addicted to screens. I'm afraid to even look at my screen time sometimes because it's a little too telling for me. Um, but yeah, things have changed, and we're definitely going to talk about that too. So, a lack of outdoor play can do a lot of things. When we don't have outdoor play growing up, it affects us in some really obvious ways, and then some that are not quite so obvious. Lack of outdoor nature play is linked to an increase in attention deficit disorders. Anxiety and depression go hand in hand. Reduced overall strength, that's bones and muscles in your body. Myopia is nearsightedness. So you see a rise in nearsightedness, being able to see close to you but not far away. So we're seeing kids need more intervention like glasses and contacts. An overall lack of coordination, the inability to take healthy risks, that's physical and social emotional. And I need to change the slide a little bit. Sensory processing disorders. Here's a little caveat. There is not actually a diagnosable sensory processing disorder. That is not a diagnosis. There are sensitivities, and we all have sensory sensitivities. The one that I share a lot is um, if it ever used to be a tree, it should not touch my teeth. When we would go to the ice cream truck as a kid, the ice cream would have the wooden spoons or a popsicle stick. I could not let that touch my teeth. Thinking about it makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Which means I'm an absolute joy at the dentist when they try and put gauze in my mouth or something crazy like that. Or with little kids and they lose a tooth and they put a tissue in their mouth to stop the bleeding. Woof. But that's that's a sensitivity for me, right? Like nails down a chalkboard just gives you the willies, you don't want to do it. When we tend to consider things a disorder, even though it's not a true diagnosis, we're looking at when those sensory issues interfere with living everyday life, right? Like I can live my life and avoid popsicle sticks touching my teeth. That's not a problem. But when it gets to the way the clothes feel on your body or the way that you eat food or interact with different environments, that's when we look at some interventions, right? So it's not such a big deal. The other thing about sensory processing issues is that a lot of times they overlap with autism spectrum disorder. Sensory issues can stand alone, right? It does not mean that if a child has some sensory issues that they are automatically on the spectrum. While they overlap, they can both exist separately. So that's important to remember as well. One thing about being outside is that there's sunshine, right? Even if the sun is not super strong in your face, beaming down on you, natural light plays a really big role in our body. It's a natural mood booster, and it helps to build healthy, strong bones and muscles. It also improves your eyesight, partially because you're outside and can see further than the four walls that you're in. But the sun also causes your pupils to restrict and your eyes to be able to focus better. And when you're using those muscles in your eyes, it helps not need intervention like glasses. And this benefits both children and adults. And part of the reason that sunshine is such a big mood booster and does all of these things is it's our number one resource for vitamin D. Vitamin D allows our body to process calcium. So if you took all the calcium supplements in the world, if your body doesn't have enough vitamin D, that calcium is just going to leave your body, right? It's not going to stay, it's not going to be incorporated. Um, Another quick medical caveat is that we do not get enough vitamin D in the typical American diet. And most people, when their doctors run blood work, they're vitamin D deficient. This has a direct effect on your mood and the bones and muscles in your body being able to hold on to that calcium. However, vitamin D is a fat soluble vitamin. So before you run out and get an over-the-counter vitamin D supplement, please consult your doctor because vitamin D being fat soluble means that your body doesn't just expel it. It'll hold onto it, and it's possible for your vitamin D to be too high. So, I like to add that in there. So I'm not saying run out and do that. But it's always something interesting, especially the more that we learn about how gut health is attached to our brain health. Vitamin D is really important. Infants and toddlers, young children, need about 15 minutes of sunlight to get all the vitamin D they need for a day. As your body grows, the amount of vitamin D that you need obviously increases because your body's bigger. And it would be irresponsible to talk about sun exposure without also considering using sunscreen. Um, the American Dermatological Society says, or at one point said, a quarter of a cup of sunscreen from head to toe every day, SPF or greater, even when it's cloudy. That's a lot, and sunscreen is expensive, so I know most of us do not get that. But if we're going to be outside regularly, it's important that we're also considering the negative effects of exposure and skin cancer. There are no sunscreens that are approved for use on babies 6 months and under. So you want to still get those infants outside, still very important part of their sensory experience and everything that we've talked about so far. But because we can't put skin protection on them, we want to make sure they have enough shade, they're not too hot, and we can do that by limiting exposure between the hottest parts of the day, which is 10 and 2 usually. And we can keep those exposures more frequent but shorter. So we're not exposing them to any damaging, um, well, not any damaging, but they're not getting sunburned or things like that. Sunscreen also, if you use sunscreen regularly, that's the number one thing to decrease signs of aging. So if you need motivation to put on sunscreen every day, there you go. I am notorious for getting ahead of my slides, so I did already talk about vitamin D. Just to recap, it allows you to absorb calcium into your muscles and bones. It restores energy and fights depression, and your need for vitamin D increases as your body gets bigger. So it starts about 15 minutes a day for the infants and works on it. The sunlight improving your eyesight. A study by the University of Cambridge found that for overall health, attention, eyesight, all the things that we're going to talk about today. 90 minutes outside was the recommendation. Most of every now and then when I'm in a live training, and I ask this question, I get a few hands that go up, but it's definitely not the majority when I say, how many of you take the kids outside for 90 minutes a day? And it's awesome that some centers are able to do that. I know the larger centers that all share outside space, that gets a little more tricky, um, because trying to get everybody outside. Um, Minimum standards does encourage us to plan that outdoor time. It has to be in your lesson plans. Um, however, there are things that definitely stop us, like weather, air quality, all kinds of different things. There was also a survey that said, ask parents, how often do you think, or how long do you think your kids are outside every day? And the average answer in the US was about 2 hours. And when they dug a little deeper on that, they found that the next question, the follow-up question was, where are your kids when they're spending this 2 hours outside? And the answer was not at home. They thought that this was happening in schools regularly, and it's absolutely not, especially when they hit public school and that focus becomes more academic on testing. Sorry, I have a really bad habit of using public school for K-12. And you obviously don't have to be in a public school, but when they leave childcare and go into kindergarten and above, the time spent outside definitely decreases each year. There's obvious benefits to being outside, like body strength, cardiovascular health, improving physical development, both fine and gross motor. Balance and depth perception come from uneven surfaces, and the ability to take healthy risks that we mentioned earlier is, can I reach for that next monkey bar? Or if I step on that rock, is it going to move? Do I jump or do I go slowly? And making those decisions about how we use our bodies. The other thing that happens when we go outside with kids is, they're naturally drawn to just being inquisitive. Can I flip this rock over? When I'm playing in the sandbox with a shovel, you hand a kid a shovel in the sandbox, and if they're new at it, one of the first things that happen is usually they dig in and they think that it takes way more energy to make that scoop. So all of a sudden, sand goes everywhere. It's in people's eyes and it's chaos. Um, that sense, so we often talk about our five senses as, sights, taste, smell, touch, all of the senses that we all know. Um, One of the senses, our body actually has thousands of senses, not just five, is called proprioception. And that's the amount of energy you have to put into something, the amount of force to make something happen. So that's why when little kids go to scoop something, they don't necessarily know how much effort is it going to take to lift that. They're really bad at that estimation. And the only way you get better at that estimation is by practicing. So digging outside in the garden is wonderful. Sandboxes, sensory bins inside, even just pouring beans or water or rice back and forth, dried corn, all of those kinds of things add to building that sense of proprioception, which will come in later again in our presentation when we talk about playing tag. Um, Building muscle strength, I wanted to make sure that we talk about tummy time a little bit. This can be obviously be done inside or outside. The recommendation from pediatricians is that tummy time should start from the day the baby is born, 2 to 3 times a day, building up to 30-minute sessions by 7 weeks old. And a lot of times, some parents know about this and they're really good with tummy time. A lot of the centers that I see, that accept 6 to 8 week old as their youngest usually, this is something that they struggle with at first because maybe they're not getting it at home. The easiest way to ease into tummy time is to put them on your chest and lay back and get them slowly into that reclined position, a little bit more with each session, or laying them on their belly across your legs so you can rub their back. We also use high contrast children's books, highest contrast being black and white or primary colors. And we put them on the ground or prop them up so that the babies can see and reach for these books. Um, Especially if they have photos of real faces, real baby faces. Our brain is wired at that age to key in on those things. So to share just examples of some of the books that we use for this, both inside and out, is this is one of our favorite, published by Barefoot Books. I don't know the name of the series overall. We just call it the Black and White Baby series. But it's all bright colors and black and white pictures of babies' faces doing different things that the babies do throughout the day anyway. And texture-wise, we like to use Child's Play books with holes. These come in board book and the bigger paperback. In the board book version, these have holes that you can stick your finger in or see through to the next page. So that makes books a little more enticing and maybe last a little bit longer for attention span in that tummy time. So we obviously do tummy time inside, but it's great to be able to do tummy time outside in the grass or put a blanket down, especially where, maybe if their body is on the blanket, that close enough that they can feel the grass, or, whatever your substrate is. So introducing just nature as often as we can strengthens that connection and means that they're more likely to spend more time outside as they get older. So what's happening here with this little cutie? What do we see going on?
Early stages of walking.
How do we know she's in the early stages of walking?
Because she's still holding on.
She's still holding on. What does she have on her feet?
Socks and not shoes.
Socks and not shoes. Which I know we go back and forth with what licensing says a little bit as far as kids being barefoot. Um, but barefoot and on an uneven surface is the fastest way to build up that core body strength and balance. We know she's working real hard because she's got that little tongue sticking out, right? So even just considering something that every child does, learning how to walk, right, is the difference between inside and outside. Inside, we're walking on man-made surfaces that we've made sure are level, right? When we're outside walking on things like grass or even concrete that's meant to be level, there's minor adjustments that your body makes in that core strength and balance to make adjustments for what it is that we're stepping on. And if we're doing it like these socks look like they have the little rubber grippy things on the bottom, if we're doing it in socks or barefoot, our skin, especially barefoot when your skin gets to touch the substrate, allows your body to make those adjustments easier, right? The communication with your brain of what your feet are feeling. So, like I said, if we can do it inside, we can find a way to do it outside. A lot of the research that I did for this presentation came from this book and also the author that the foreword was written by. If you look at the picture, Richard Louv wrote The Last Child in the Woods, but he's also written like 3 or 4 others. I could be wrong, could be even more since then. The nature principle, I think I used. I think there's one called vitamin N. And it's all about how important that connection to nature is. This particular book was written by Angela Hanscom. And she said, when children don't experience enough movement opportunities to challenge and strengthen their bones, the load-bearing capacity of bones decreases significantly. This reduction leads to the breakdown and release of calcium, which is reabsorbed by the body, leaving bones more brittle and weak and increasing the risk of fractures. So not being outside, not challenging the muscles enough, and not getting that vitamin D, it not only doesn't build up the calcium in our body, but it leaches the calcium out of our bones, right? So we lose strength by not being outside, using our bodies, and getting that vitamin D. From 2001 to 2011, there was a study published that said there was over a 20% reduction in the average child's muscle strength and stamina. So it means that the children are weaker and they tire faster. So if we go back to actually, I'm gonna pause myself before I get ahead of my slides again, because that's what I do. And anything that you see in this presentation that has dates and numbers, I do have the references for that. I didn't clog up the slides with it, but if anybody, if you're nerdy like me and love to dig into that research, I'm happy to share all of my references to where I found the statistics.
Thanks, Amy. We did have a question earlier too, asking if you'd be willing to share the slides.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Um, Yes. So when I originally wrote this presentation, it was like 3 or 4 hours long. I do a really long, like in-depth, we talk about this. So, yeah, there's plenty more. If this interests anybody in here, I'm happy to schedule, future training on digging into some of these things. But absolutely, I'm always willing to share my resources and slides. So strong muscles equal strong bodies. So there's a connection. You're on the last slide, we said that a 20% reduction in muscle strength and stamina. Well, there's a connection between that muscle strength and stamina to our immune systems. And basically, if we're not building strong bodies, muscle and bone wise, we're also not building our immunological response, and kids are more likely to get sick more frequently. Add to this that indoor climate control recycles germs, no matter how clean you keep it or changing your filters, right? Think about being in an airplane and the air you left with is the air you arrive with at your destination, right? Because they have to keep the pressure and pump the air through the cabin. Same thing, more air, but less more air moving through your home, and there's obviously inside air coming in. But when we spend all of our time inside, those, I don't think any of us live without AC in Texas right now. And I apologize if you do, I feel for you. But yeah, that indoor climate control that keeps us physically comfortable doesn't really do anything for eliminating those germs, right? And we saw that a lot immediately when COVID hit, that, there were ultraviolet, that basically brought sunshine inside. That's what ultraviolet is, to, constantly filter and clean the air and try and get rid of those germs. So, being outside, um, this is where I do the allergy caveat. When we as a society spend more time outside, it's like your body is constantly exposed to small doses of allergens, right? So we build up a response typically. There is a genetic component to that where, I'm allergic to every tree everywhere, right? So, I have to take allergy medicine every day just to function, especially in Texas, where there's no super cold winter where we are to shut down a lot of that pollen production. So, yeah, if you are just genetically allergic to something, being outside isn't magically going to make your allergies go away. But we know that as a society, when we're spending more time outside with our young children and they're getting those micro exposures to, just the same way that we do with germs, with those allergens, overall, as a community, as a society, those allergic reactions reduce, right? That doesn't mean take your snottiest kid outside and, in a week outside, those allergies are going to magically go away. Absolutely not. right? So we're talking generality in the big population sense, not necessarily for individuals. I would be remiss if we didn't talk about how inclement weather keeps us inside in Texas. Our I know people pick on me because I'm from Maine and I get so cold here in the winter, and part of that is because it's so wet. 20 degrees in Maine is not nearly as bad as 40 degrees here, and that humidity just chills you to the bone, right? The humidity does the same thing for the heat. It amplifies it. So, and depending on where I'm assuming everybody here is from Texas. I apologize if I'm being too specific or assuming. But yeah, we deal with a lot of different weather. Texas is a huge state. Some areas see snow frequently in the winter, some see more rain. We get extensive heat pretty much no matter where we are. So there's lots of reasons that we don't get to go outside all the time. I live on the Gulf Coast. We see hurricanes. I'm definitely not bringing kids out in a thunderstorm, right? There are no specific regulations set by licensing on at this temperature or specific guidelines on when to take kids out or not. That is completely up to the center within reasonable expectations. Um, we never want to take kids outside when you can hear thunder. If you can hear thunder, you're within the range of lightning. And there's a free app that I use all the time. I think it's just called Lightning. The little icon is yellow and it has a black lightning bolt. And it tells me you can set the range. My girls play softball and I coach, so it's my responsibility if there's lightning within a 10-mile radius, we're not supposed to be on the fields. And then from that last lightning strike, if you can wait 30 minutes and there's no more lightning strikes, that's when it's safe to go back. So that's a good rule of thumb when it comes to thunder and lightning. However, dealing with this really intense heat in Texas, I feel like that's one state of weather that all Texans can identify with. What do we do when it's really hot in the summer? Almost every child care center does it with the kids in the summer. How do we keep them cool outside? Anybody in the chat?
What? Water play?
Water play, right? We have splash day. Absolutely. So, what's the difference between taking them outside for splash day and taking them outside in the rain?
Your water bill.
You're the first person to answer that way. Absolutely. That's true. I think that's a great way to look at it. Most of the time, when it's raining, the teacher has to get wet, right? Some teachers get wet on splash day, others are like, here you go. I'll dry you off when you're done. But that makes a big difference as for our comfort outside, right? So, but I make the argument that, as long as there's no thunder and lightning or, sideways rain and wind, that just like you said, the biggest difference is our water bill, right? It's free water on the ground rather than what we have to pay for. And if we can train parents to send appropriate clothing for splash day, we can train parents to send appropriate clothing for rainy days, right? Rain boots, slickers, that kind of thing is fairly easy to get. And take them outside in those natural puddles. Let them stomp around. Let them get muddy. Wash them off the same way that you do for splash day, right? So that's one of the biggest examples that I like to point out of how a lot of times it has to do with the adult level of comfort being outside, making the difference for are we really taking our kids outside and for long enough, right? Um, I have been at childcare centers where I had a teacher that tell me, "Oh, well, it's early. Our time that's scheduled outside in the playground is really early, and there's always dew on the slide." So I don't always love to take them out. Bring a towel. They're in diapers. Send one send the first kid down and the dew is gone, right? And they won't even know the difference. Yeah, we have to make it a priority for us to get the kids outside, or it's just not going to happen. The other thing, we've talked about a lot of the physical reasons to be outside. The executive functioning skills in your brain, and usually I say this and I point to my forehead, and then I have to remind myself that not everybody knows why I'm pointing to my forehead. Executive function is built in your prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain right behind your forehead. Um, and this is the last part of the brain that develops in the human body. So 80% of the adult brain is formed by the time you're 3 and 90% by the time you're 4. But this is the part that just keeps on growing. This is why 3-year-olds act like 3-year-olds and teenagers act like teenagers. They're teenagers are in big kid bodies without a fully functioning prefrontal cortex. In fact, this part of the brain is showing in most current research that it's not fully developed until you're in your mid 30s. So there's an argument that adolescence lasts into your mid 30s. And those of you that are above your mid 30s can probably look back and vouch for that. When did that clarity finally kick for you in making decisions or the way that you take risks in your life? So this is the reason that it's difficult for young children to be able to share or take turns. It's the reason that teenagers make really impulsive social decisions a lot of the times, or physical decisions. This part of the brain is actually built by being outside, not just by being outside. There's other things that we can do to help facilitate this brain growth. But being outside has the best case scenario for development with small children. And part of that is that risk association, right? Do I climb that? Can I jump from that? Um, and all of that, building that part of the brain also leads to emotional control, impulse control, conflict resolution, analytical thinking, etc. Um, Also in building brains outside, I said that if we can teach it inside, generally we can teach it outside. And initially, if kids are not used to being outside, then we're going to see them very distracted by what's outside because it's new and exciting and they want to explore it. But the longer that you spend on a regular basis outside with kids, you're going to see a longer, undisrupted attention span. So they're going to pay attention longer. You're going to see less challenging behavior, and it actually stores the information that you're teaching outside in a more long-term portion of their memory. So you're going to see increase in learning outcomes, primarily just because being outside is a multi-sensory experience. So, are we spending time outside? Absolutely not. And we all identified some of the reasons that we're not doing that, right? So 2013 to 2023, we saw the steepest increase in ADD and ADHD diagnosis ever. Okay, so in those 10 years, we went from 2 million pediatric cases, so between the ages of 3 and 17, 2 million cases to 5.3 million. So that more than doubled. Um, in 2008, it was the first time in the world's history that more people lived in cities and towns than in rural areas. And we're going to come back to why that had a definite effect on access to the outdoors. So sensory integration, when we plan sensory experiences in our classroom, it is frequently based on touch, sound, sometimes taste, depending on how your center deals with food. If you can provide food for the kids or if they have to bring all of their food from home. If we have control over some of that, textural, taste, flavor. Our sight and our smell affects the way we eat a lot. So senses are important. Does anybody know the most neglected sense that we focus on in the classroom? Which one do we focus on the least?
We have I guess of scent in the chat.
Absolutely. The sense of smell or scent is the most overlooked sense focused on in the classroom. But the idea is that any sensory play that we create inside um, is typically focused on one or two senses. Anything we do outside is automatically multisensory. We have air moving against our skin. We have noises and scents and sights that we don't have control over, right? Where we as adults tend to control just about everything inside the four walls of our classroom. So just by being outside and increasing that sensory activity, we see an increase in long-term learning outside. Um, let's skip that slide. One way that that I like to encourage, if you're looking for ways to do more outside, it can be overwhelming to take that first step. 99% of us, if not all of us, use weather as a staple in circle time, right? But we do it sitting on a rug inside, a lot of times in a classroom that doesn't even have windows to outside. And we talk about how hot or cold it is, if there's clouds in the sky, is it raining, is it windy? Why are we not taking a walk outside, even for just a few minutes, and let them feel that weather while we're talking about it? And great ways to do that are on the left, I have just a cheap Walmart thermometer, right? I think we buy these things for $3 or $4 when they go on sale. They're about that big, so really big numbers. And it doesn't even matter at first if the kids can read the numbers on the scale. When you're taking them outside, you can take a picture with your phone or use a marker, dry erase marker, and mark, here's where the red line was this morning. And here's where the red line is at noon, and then here's where the red line is right before we go home, or even day to day, right? So you can talk about relativity of that red line, and does lower mean hotter or colder? What does it mean when the red line is really high up? As you expose them to being able to read these scales, they're going to ask questions or make observations about what those numbers are and what that really means. So even for your youngest, where you're not talking about necessarily the gradient or the number specifically, is it hotter, is it colder, and where is that red line? What does that mean? Same thing with a rain gauge. It's eventually, as a former middle school and high school science teacher, I beg you to make sense of reading a ruler and these scales eventually with kids. Please expose them to this kind of measuring because it's one of the biggest challenges we see in middle school and high school. And there's no reason a middle schooler shouldn't be able to read a ruler, right? But part of it is if we're using all digital tools or they're not exposed to these things from the beginning, it becomes a chore to learn at that age. So measure, did it rain more yesterday or this week than last week? And you can keep this data on the walls of your classroom. So instead of sliding a drawn picture, not even a photograph of a cloud into a pocket chart to say that it was cloudy today, teach them how to take data outside and make real life observations in their world. Now, I put this picture of a beautiful weather vane up here just because I found that some people, when I said the word weather vane, didn't necessarily know what I was talking about. So I wanted to put a picture to the term. These are beautiful, they're pretty, they're also very, very expensive, and I don't expect something this intricate to be within a child care center budget. You can use something as easy as a flag or a windsock or anything that's going to blow in the wind. Which way is it blowing? How fast is it moving, right? You don't even need the north, south, east, and west, even though that's a great extension activity. How can you tell it's windier now than it was before? Or is it consistently windy? Or does the flag move and then stop, move and then stop, right? So you're making observations, you're connecting language and communication, you're doing all kinds of wonderful things. And this doesn't have to be a super long activity. If it's a regular part of your routine, I do encourage you to put these tools not all in one area, but around your outdoor space so that you're incorporating movement into the activity. We're going to go to the temperature station over here, the rain gauge is over there, and just encourage observations with your kids. So, we talked about the rise in ADD and ADHD. From 2016 to 2019, the data was collected for ages 3 to 17. This is in the United States. And this is the percent of our pediatric population that's diagnosed with these conditions, right? ADD, ADHD, anxiety and depression tend to go hand in hand and in most cases are not even separable. Behavior problems, we're seeing 5 to 10% of our population. And a lot of times, if you have one of these, you have more than one of these, right? So there's overlap. And when we're looking at these things steadily increasing in our population, tied to the amount of time that we are or not spending outside, um, spending time outside is a more long-term focus and it's more financially accessible than treating a lot of these conditions with therapy or medications. So, what other barriers do we have that make it difficult to get kids outside? I've talked about a few. Urbanization is a really, really big one. More of us on the planet. So think about even the third world countries. In 2008, I said this before, more than 50% for the first time ever, more than 50% of the world's population lived in cities and towns. This same year marked an unprecedented 17% increase in the diagnosis of conditions in children that require therapeutic intervention. Okay. Um, not, I don't believe this to be a coincidence. I think that our lack of exposure and connection to nature is creating issues, right? So urbanization means less green space, less availability. Higher population density means increased crime, safety for children. Beth and I both talked about being outside on our own. My parents didn't know where we were during the day. We were outside playing. That doesn't happen now for safety concerns, right? We also talked about parents being comfortable letting kids outside. In 2004, children played outside 50% less than their parents' generation. And the reason in the survey that was quoted is because the parents aren't comfortable outside. So if we're not comfortable as teachers or parents taking our kids outside, we're perpetuating a downward spiral of less and less time outside, right? I talked about banning tag in the early 2000s. I was still in college. I wasn't even a teacher yet. We were hearing about elementary schools banning tag because kids were getting hurt. There was very poor conflict resolution skills. And at first, when I heard this news, I was like, what are we doing to our kids? Like how, I felt like the quintessential like kids are so soft these days, right? We played games like Red Rover where people broke bones on a regular basis or knocked their teeth out. Not that I am saying you should do that. That was a horrible game. I don't know why we ever thought that was a good idea. But tag, something as ubiquitous and like yeah, every culture I feel like has some sort of tag. Why all of a sudden can we not handle this? Why can we not do this? Well, if we're spending less time outside, we talked about that sense of proprioception and not knowing the force it takes to do something. We talked about reduced muscle and bone strength. and executive functioning skills not being built up at the rate that they should be. Well, you combine all of those things in a game of tag, and you end up with kids being seriously injured because I overestimated the amount of force that it takes to tag somebody, and they were pushed to the ground. Well, they fell and broke their arm because we have weaker bones, right? So all of this made sense through the research that I was doing. And I feel like that really highlights how we are changing and the importance of how we need to make an effort to get our kids outside more and more. And we've touched on a lot of these things. Like I said, I've cut out a lot of the slides, but a lot of these are meant for a much longer presentation as well. So I fit everything into to the beginning. We obviously see higher screen time, and even the CDC and licensing to an extent has changed like what screen time is. What it is, what it isn't, how it's recommended. Um, because during COVID, that screen time was interaction with human beings on the other end. And that may be the only sense of familial connection, right? So it increased our ability to talk to family all over the world because we thought about it in a completely different way. But that's totally different than sitting down playing a video game or being a consumer versus a producer. No matter what, some good rules of thumb or are no screen time under 2 years old. If they're going to have screen time, try and connect it to something educational. Licensing says that if you're going to use screen time with over 2 years old, there is a time limit on it that I can never remember, but it has to be a planned part of your instructional, your lesson plan, right? And not during rest time, nap time, meals, or snacks. Stay away from things that have violence, etc. So I'm right up, my clock says 10:57, and I want to make sure we can take a couple of questions. And if you have any wrap-up stuff, Beth, I don't want to cut into your time either.
Yeah, we can take some questions. In the meantime, while folks are adding questions to the chat, just a couple, I'm going to put a poll up real quick. We have been asked by Amy if we can share your contact information with her, but I would just want to make sure that that's okay because we didn't ask y'all ahead of time. So if y'all could answer that poll, that would be fantastic. Um, and then also we have our evaluation, and we all are in education, so we understand the importance of evaluation. It helps us plan moving forward and then also share with Amy for her purposes as well. Our next webinar is Bugs, Bees, Butterflies, and Blossoms, a multi-decade EE program. Would love for you to join us on that. I'm going to put the link there. And then it is that time of year. Our summit registration has opened. So every year we have a conference. This year it's going to be in Bryan College Station, and early bird registration just opened up. So we'd love to see you there. And Amy, it looks like we got 100% yes, so I'll share that information with you. Um,
Yay!
so thank you everyone for filling that out. And I am not seeing any other questions come in. Do
Um,
Go
and
ahead. Yes. Oh,
Sarah, you are more than welcome to share my email address
mhm.
with anybody that was here. I am happy to talk about this all day, every day. If you get back to your centers and find that you're trying to